Most Americans don't like the tariffs, and most Americans don't think the Trump administration has a plan.
This would cause a reduction of GDP by 4%. We'd be in a deep recession.
Is the White House open to any discussion around Medicare?
I want to jump into a Face the Nation interview with one of Trump's top economic advisors, Kevin Hasset, to better see what their plans are for the economy that they're actively destroying. So if you can, as always, leave us a like on the video. Helps us out in the algorithm. It helps us out tremendously growing as a channel and lets us know you enjoy the content. And let's otherwise jump right in.
Is the White House open to any discussion around Medicare?
Well, first of all, what's happening is that the senators, respecting the legislative process, are discussing what they think that they can put on the table. And the president has made it clear that ending waste, fraud, and abuse, and giving benefits to illegals, and giving benefits to people who are able-bodied workers, those are his high priorities. If the Senate comes up with other things they'd like us to look at, I guess we would have a look at them. But there have been a lot of false stories about Medicare being on the table, and it's totally not on the table.
What I will concede to MAGA Republicans is they are clever at lying because they hide it behind layers of knowledge they know the average American won't have. We have something called the Statutory Pay-As-You-Go Act. It was passed in 2010. In short, it requires spending cuts to offset any new budget legislation that would otherwise affect or raise the deficit past a certain level. Medicare isn't exempt from this. Things like Social Security are. The structure of how this works with these cuts, it would lead to roughly $490 billion being cut from Medicare specifically by 2027. Medicare is one of the most efficient systems we have. Administration costs are incredibly low. Fraud rates are incredibly low. Denial rates are incredibly low. People really like their Medicare. The idea that there's any bit of this that needs cut is founded on complete lies, especially the idea that we're going to cut from Medicare and it's not going to be reinvested into Medicare, but it's going to somehow help. Crazy. Also, reporting has it that Trump behind closed doors has already signaled that he would sign the bill even if it includes cuts to Medicare. Probably because MAGA has shown him that they'll believe anything he says. All he has to do is say waste, fraud, and abuse, and they'll let him steal their Medicare.
Are you comfortable with this House bill as it is written? What do you want to see done to Medicaid?
Right. Again, what we want to see done now is we want the Senate to pass the bill, and then we want the House and the Senate to work out their differences while negotiating with us. And right now, the Senate has to get the votes they need to pass the bill, and we're supporting them in that process. But you also need to be mindful when you're thinking about this that one of the things that we put out a report for the Council of Economic Advisors that if the bill doesn't pass, then they estimate that this would cause a reduction of GDP by 4%. We'd be in a deep recession.
I find this line of argumentation to try and justify the terrible Trump tax bill to be incredibly annoying because it's essentially, oh, if we don't sign this, taxes will go up. Like, this is only the reality because in Trump's last tax plan, he made the rich guy tax cuts permanent and the working class tax cuts temporary, where it's again just a delay of that same thing over where the increase is just put off. Those making under $51,000 a year will have their taxes go up by 2029. And all we're doing to get this minor delay this time that we're now saying is, oh, a massive issue, the tax increase could happen, still going to happen, but we're giving up billions in medical research. We're giving up billions to FEMA, billions to school lunch program, roughly 15 million Americans healthcare, more if they start tinkering with Medicare, billions to food stamps, and even more permanent tax cuts will be given to the rich as a result. When to think if Kamala Harris was just in office, we would have had permanent no tax on tips, a permanent increase in earned income tax credits, permanent working class tax decreases of $3,000 child tax credit, with the burden being shifted to the wealthy rather than the working class. MAGA fell for it again, but this time it'll cost them their grandpa's cancer treatments.
Most Americans don't like the tariffs, and most Americans don't think the Trump administration has a plan. We're also hearing from top economists, including the head of the Philadelphia Federal Reserve, who said the rules are really unclear and business leaders need certainty. When will they get that certainty from the administration?
Right. Well, you can be certain that there's going to be some tariffs, and the stuff that folks have been saying is going to happen to tariffs is inconsistent with what you and I have talked about before, Margaret. So what's going on, right, is that we've had a trade deficit with China forever and ever because they just want to sell stuff here so that they can create jobs in China and help, control their government. So if people are unemployed, then it's harder for a dictatorship to run.
I swear to God, when this dude said this, it was so stupid. I had to stop and look up his credentials and qualifications on the spot as to who he even is to have this job, because it was maybe the most juvenile portrayal I've ever seen of why we have trade deficits with China. And the dude has a PhD, so he's definitely just purposefully being obtuse and deceitful here. We utilize China for final assembly on lots of electronics and massive corporations because that manufacturing just wouldn't be profitable to do in America with the wages we would have to pay for it. Apple is the pertinent example of this for equipment or machinery that we then use for our manufacturing that, again, wouldn't be profitable or productive for the wages that we pay here in America. You could think of a lot of the parts that go into auto manufacturing for this as the pertinent example. Our economy is just structured to have more of a need for imports. So by nature, we're going to have a lot of trade deficits with countries who have things that we could utilize. This, however, isn't a problem. It allows for more innovation of more profitable things to manufacture with domestic jobs more spread throughout rather than wealth being concentrated to corporations who can export. Trade deficits are not something to be scared of. Anyone who tells you that does not understand macroeconomics, or they're purposefully being deceitful because they want to now support Trump's tariff plan. Tariffs always end up being a tax on Americans, and not a single Trump person has yet to give a reason as to why we're doing this that makes the least bit of economic sense.